This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News-free Dixie.
News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Okay, let's see, what else have we got on the, you gave me something of an agenda before we got started.
Oh yeah, like the Hickerson trial and outcome. The brother who was an ex-Navy sailor who he had a relationship, an online relationship with a transgender woman named Dee Wiggum. They met for the first time last July 23rd, 2016 at a hotel in Biloxi. He found out that she was actually, or used to be a he or whatever. And he ended up, I guess, losing his mind and stabbing this person 119 times. He just recently found guilty. He pleaded guilty. He wasn't found guilty. He pleaded guilty. He was facing the death penalty. And now he's serving 40 years in prison. He's just 21 years old, wanted to be a weather forecaster. But he felt like he was fooled, and he lost his mind. I mean, temporary insanity, I guess. But I just want to get your thoughts about that case, because I thought it was interesting because, the guy did not reveal to that guy that he used to be a man or whatever you want to call it, because it's difficult now. But what's your thoughts about that case, Judge?
Well, let me say this. It was a homicide.
Okay.
Now, first-degree murder basically is when something is coolly, rationally, and logically figured out, a means of concealing it, escape, etc., or developed basically like a contract killing.
Mm-hmm.
They also have that coming out when it's a murder and the perpetration of a felony. In other words, somebody goes in to commit a holdup and the shop owner shoots back at the holdup artist, misses, and kills a bystander. Well, the shop manager is not held for the homicide. It's supposed to be the robber who put it all in motion. But now second-degree murder has an interesting classical definition. It's almost the same as voluntary manslaughter. That is, it's a homicide committed in the heat of passion, induced by, I don't want to use the technical terms, but induced by provocation sufficient to cause the defendant to act in an irrational fashion. Manslaughter is a homicide committed in the heat of passion produced by provocation sufficient to cause an ordinary and reasonable person to act irrationally. Now, in California schools, they're actually starting in the 3rd grade. They have an animated thing they show the kids. I've seen it. It says, my big brother likes to dress up like a girl. He likes to go out to parties and dance. He likes to go to clubs and dance. He has fun. He likes to fool other boys into thinking he's a girl. This is okay. No, that will get you killed.
Mm-hmm.
You see, a lot of what's going on now and has gone on for the last 40 or so years is the product of our wish human nature were like this, but having not much to do with human nature. And we're animals, and we have to breed, and we have to court, and we have to mate, and we have to rear progeny, kids. So there's a human courtship ritual that has arisen just like it has for wolves, bears, lions, you name it. Chimpanzees, gorillas, you name it. And the females are alluring to the males are attracted to the females because they show power, and the female is convinced that being with the male in question is more likely to be to her benefit than not, and that male will help her raise the offspring. Okay. It's developed so that you are a man and you walking down the street, you're a young man, and you see something out of the corner of your eye that looks interesting, and it's got hips and it's swing, and you look over because that's Mother Nature talking about sexual attraction. Girls look up and the guy looks like he's got power, he's buff, that's the first thing that attracts them. Oh, wow. He looks like he's a strong guy. Maybe later on they get into your mind, or maybe later on you get into her mind, but it's like buying a new car. You know, you don't want a bad-looking car. Oh, that's a nice-looking car. And then you want to see what kind of internals it has, what kind of motor, accessories, and how well it runs and does what you need it to do. That's kind of like initial attraction. Have you ever been motion sick, seasick?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your eyes are telling you something other than what your inner ear is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of what this whole thing is about when it comes to this guy murdering this transvestite. His eyes and his senses were telling him this is a reasonably desirable female. And then it comes out that it's not a female at all. And that sort of gives your inner equilibrium a shock. The next thing, and I've actually handled homicides like this myself as a defense lawyer, the dynamic is that you think you're a straight guy. So a homosexual starts trying to hit on you. And the immediate offense is, why in the world is this homosexual thinking I would go for that? That's insulting. And that can produce some violent reactions that are just out of that person's control. They go off and react without realizing what they're doing. Temporary insanity, if you would. What is worse for this dynamic is to find the straight guy finding it's by ambush. It's a homosexual who wanted to be with him. Why would the homosexual pick him as being susceptible to reciprocating the homosexuality? And then the homosexual ambushed him because it's dressed up like a woman. See, there are a lot of assaults and homicides committed because of that. A lot of them don't go very far because the transvestite just got some teeth knocked out because he was trying to make moves on somebody in a bar, and that person didn't realize what it was until it came out, and then he took off, and there wasn't enough connection for somebody to find who did it. But you see, you start messing with fundamental human and nature in there, and you're going to provoke a response. Now, what you do behind closed doors is your business. Nobody has a right to tell you what you do, as long as you don't hurt anybody. But you set somebody off so they react without thinking about it, you've got a problem. And too much of what's going on now is we don't like the paradigm that is humanity. We want to shift it someplace else, but, you know, people haven't changed fundamentally in 40, 45 years. They're the same creature. So you act at your peril. And, you know, there is a possibility, there's another way of looking at that. You know, in places like California and New York, you've got all this hate language and stuff where if you call a homosexual the wrong thing, you can be prosecuted for it. Or if you take certain actions toward a homosexual that are okay toward somebody else, you can be prosecuted for it. Well, how about the reciprocal? If you're a homosexual and you sit up there and you insult a heterosexual, and you do the same thing in reverse, shouldn't that be a crime? Or, women get all upset when men want to make certain moves on them and say you shouldn't do that. Well, shouldn't that be a crime too if somebody who is transvestite decides to make a move on a guy without full advisement? So it's hypocritical if you don't take back what you want given out. See, there are all kinds of things in here that it's like you try to change things beyond First Amendment freedom of speech, you have problems.
Now, Judge, have you remember a time, like I'm thinking to myself now, since all these cases coming out, or these situations, do you think it's normal now? Is it the new normal to ask a person, were you always a man or were you always a woman? If you are considering about dating them or even more? Is that the new normal?
You know what? That's how ridiculous it's gotten. I mean, the thing of it is, just think about it. You can't talk to a man, you can't talk to a woman at work. That's sexual harassment. You run into somebody at a bar, you're liable to have to ask that question, excuse me, are you a man or are you, what's that, something on TV they cancel a show on, with them Kardashians, Okay, are you a Caitlyn? Are you a woman? Are you always been one? See, it's gotten ridiculous. And then you see, here's the other thing too. Only a very small percentage of your population does that. So what's going on is you want to undo human nature for the benefit of that very small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Intellectually, okay, fine. But when you start getting these deep down inside visceral reactions to this kind of stuff, you shouldn't be surprised. And somewhere along here, we've got this too. They have their rights. We have our rights. And in the middle, there is what you call the First Amendment that allows free speech. We cannot castigate a full and open discussion of these issues because they just fail. The news media does not want that free and open discussion because, like they themselves report, 85 to 90% of all people involved in the media are LGBTQ.
I say the number again, Judge. What's the percentage?
85 to 90% of everybody involved in the Hollywood and New York industries associated with the media and entertainment happen to be gay.
Wow.
They have an agenda. Just imagine what might be the case if black folk had taken over Hollywood back in 1969 or 70, and you had some that were devoted to the cause who used the opportunity from 1970 to now to propagandize the country into accepting us. They have their absolute right to do what they want, but on the other hand, straight people have rights too. And the difference between the straight people and what their situation is without straight people, you don't have another generation of humans. You put two gays on an island, you get nothing. Put two heterosexual man and a woman on an island, you keep going.
So is this a form of eugenics? Is this agenda a form of eugenics? Population control?
I'll tell you something. This part, I think it may be a built-in population control device.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that based on the following. When I was in college, one of the things I did to help pay my way, just taking care of rent, stuff like that, was I would go over and work in the biology department, and I'd clean out the rat warrens. They had populations of rats. And one of their experimental protocols that struck me as fascinating at the time was creating stress by increasing the population density of the various rat warrens. They had already done a workup to determine which rats were dominant and which were most submissive. So when they started crowding the populations, the most submissive ones started becoming homosexual. And the more crowded they got, the more widespread that homosexual trend in the rats became. But it worked up almost on a 1-1 correlation between least dominant first, next dominant second, third, so on, and the dominant rats stayed heterosexual. So the non-dominant ones didn't breed. I'm not surprised at that happening right now.